Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Keele Business Gateway webinar. Today, I'm joined by three great people to talk to us about No Time to Waste, which is resources in a post-pandemic world. This plays not only to the climate change emergency we face, but the urgency with which we respond to COVID-19. Importantly, the two would seem to be intrinsically linked. So before all of that, let me introduce you to our panel today. We've got Professor Paul Dewar, Professor Sharon George, and Trevor Nicoll, who's the president of the Chartered Institute of Waste Management. I hope I've got that right there, Trevor.
That's great.
Can you tell us, that before we start, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Can I start with you, Trevor?
Okay, so my name's Trevor Nicoll. I'm my day job is a head of waste resources and environment for Cambridge City and South Cambridgeshire district councils. However, I am a resident of Staffordshire, so there's a bit of a change there. So I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, been involved with waste management for about 15 years, very much on the how does waste work with our customers, our residents, and that day-to-day working about how do we collect it and how do them process it and turning that waste into resource.
Thank you. What about you, Paul?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. Annette, my name's Paul Dewar. I'm a Professor of Sustainability and Innovation here at Keele. I've only just started, in fact. I started in May. Haven't been to the campus other than for interviews. So my induction has been entirely online with these sort of virtual meetings. We're all getting used to those. My background is in innovation and sustainability, as you might think. Over the last 20 years, I've looked at how firms mainly can change what they do and how they do it to reduce their environmental impacts. I'm part of Future Earth, which is a global network of academics and innovators looking to work together to reduce environmental impacts and improve sustainability outcomes. And as part of that, we have a working group on circular economy, and I'm part of that group. Lovely.
Sharon?
Okay, I'm also an academic at Keele, so I've got a background in materials chemistry. I started out as a refractory engineer to do with corrosion in manufacturing, and I've gradually been kind of dragged into the sustainability sphere, and now I run the Masters in Environmental Sustainability and Green Technology. And I'm interested in technology development, but also resources. So some of my research hinges around waste behaviour, but also that circular piece around taking a waste, so things like batteries, food waste, and how we can turn those into useful and financially viable resources. And so my take on all this is very interdisciplinary. So a lot of my work will often cut across economic, social and political factors and technical. And I think it's only when those things all work together that we're going to come up with some really good solutions like today.
All right, well, thanks very much, Sharon. And just a little bit about myself. I'm one of the entrepreneurs in residence at Keele Business School in the Sustainability Hub. Part of my role is to support SMEs who come to Keele and support them in their ambition to develop and to grow. My background is varied, but I've run my own businesses and for over 30 years ran an energy efficiency business, which eventually we took into employee ownership. So that's a little bit about me. Just to say to the audience, you please do get involved in this conversation. It's a really important conversation that we're having today. If you want to get involved, you can submit a question on the right-hand side of your screen, or you can submit one anonymously by email by scrolling down to the bottom and having that conversation there, and that will come to us. And also to continue the conversation on Twitter and on LinkedIn using the hashtag Keele Talks Business. So please do get involved. Please do join in. But just let me start with my first question to all of you. And that is, in the face of COVID and the climate emergency, the principles of circular economy, which you've just mentioned there, Paul, are paramount. But we have lots of talk, and we hear lots of talk about net zero carbon, the circular economy, climate emergency, and many other terms that we use. For the layperson, I think they can be forgiven for being confused. And how do we then engage with people if people are confused even about the terminology? What do all of these terms mean in lay people's language? How can you simplify that? Can we start with you first, Sharon?
Yeah, there's a myriad of issues there. So, like at the heart of a lot of what, like, you know, when we talk about things like carbon reduction and energy saving, you know, there's a big focus on carbon because the resources that we use are all linked to that piece around driving those carbon emissions up through manufacture and through waste. But alongside that, there's also language around how we respond to those changes in the environment. They've already started happening. So we've already started having an impact on weather patterns. So I'm doing a lot of work at the moment with Bangladesh, who are responding to more powerful cyclones. You know, weather events are becoming more extreme, and of course low-lying areas are being flooded. And then even in the UK, we're seeing, you know, more wildfires. We're seeing drier summers. We're seeing more flooding happening. So this resilience to climate change is another whole load of language that we're talking about. So no, there's, and then of course you've got environmental issues that are alongside that. So these things do tend to get kind of juggled together with the language, but they're all interrelated, but are different kind of sort of faces of the same piece, if you like.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Paul?
You're right, Annette, to point to the confusion around a concept like circular economy, for instance, which is, you know, we would in academic circles refer to it as a contested concept. And so even amongst academics, there is no consensus over what it means. So there was a recent article from just a couple of years ago that did a review of over 100 studies, all of which were looking to talk about the circular economy. And amongst those 114 articles, there were 95 or 96 different definitions of circular economy. And early on, when we're trying to bring people together to talk about circular economy, this contestation doesn't matter so much. You know, it's a good topic to discuss here. It's a good topic to discuss in seminar rooms. It's a good topic to discuss in the hallways for policymakers. But actually, then when you want to design strategic interventions to accelerate the circular economy, then it really does matter what we all understand by it.
Yeah.
So there is a sort of a de facto understanding of what it means. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have a definition which I think is widely accepted, widely quoted. So if you look on their website, they would say it's about designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. But and whilst that's, you can sort of try and get your head around that, I think there is still a lot of confusion about it. And I think what we see happening quickly is some agreement about what we mean, because then that will help us then finance circular initiatives in large firms, in small firms, and that should be part of the recovery from COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. Trevor, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I'll take that right sort of back down to sort of the more basics as sort of the non-academic in the room. So my view is this: all of this, whether it's net zero or if it is about circular economy, it probably comes down to we all need to use less, use better, and reuse it. So it's really that blunt kind of basis, but that is about us doing it together. So it's about looking at our whole supply chain, how we make things, what do we make, how do we use it, and what's the cost of doing so. So that's whether it's us as individuals or businesses and so us as individual customers or businesses, all the way through to us as technical experts. It's actually looking at how we can flow that material through. But in reality, the way we're going to work with a lot of this is actually using less. If we don't reduce our consumption, we're just not going to be able to reinvent things that I think we're on a free planet living at the moment. We need to reduce that because however experts we are in our fields, we're not going to be able to change that unless we can bring in another couple of planets that we can pillage of its resources. So I think that's where we just need to keep it simple for our sort of, for us as human beings and general residents, that it's simple messages out there. And it's that joined up approach. And it is really good to see businesses and residents and sort of industry talking and working together, because we will need to be able to solve it together. If not, we will just push problems around that circular economy.
Yeah. Lovely. So just to give some clarity, to a little more clarity, if you like, hate to ask this question early on in the conversation, but I think it's quite important that you can tell me what it means, but if you show me what it means. So what just at a high level, can you share some of your favourite examples of circular economy in action, so that people can understand? Oh yeah, I get it now.
I can do a bit of that.
Sorry, Trevor, are you on mute? I think you're trying to say something.
So I can go with a real simple one. So it's probably one what we've done really well. So it's our milk bottle, and you can either do it both ways. You can either do it as your glass milk bottle with the milkman that comes round and being reused, because that is something that we haven't even changed that product. It's cleaned and comes out. There is arguments about there is a cost of by having that person come round and deliver individually to the house. So we may want Milkman Plus, who delivers more of our shopping, but even a normal plastic milk bottle, so many of those are collected by local authorities, reprocessed. I know where I am at the moment, our material is collected, reprocessed within Cambridgeshire, and then the plastic is reprocessed within Cambridgeshire and then filled again, reprocessed. So it doesn't actually leave probably 50 miles from your house. It just circulates around quite quickly. Great example of how that works, and people everybody's using that.
Okay, Sharon, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about when we look at circular economy, a good example of that, and I don't know how many people who are tuned in live in the Newcastle area, but in this area we have food recycling. So in this area, any waste that we have can then go into this little bin that gets picked up and taken to an anaerobic digester. It gets processed. So we get the biogas from it, and it gets squeezed out, and that solid bit can get put back on the soil, and the liquid and all the nutrients can get put back as fertilizer. So we've got this closed loop on nutrients. And I think that kind of looking at the way that when we finish with something, of using every part of it and recycling it back in, and trying to close those, at the moment, the way we're using things is linear. So we go to the supermarket, we buy our lettuce or whatever with water that's, it's been flown in from wherever it's grown, and all of those nutrients that have taken to grow that. And then we put it in the fridge and we leave it too long, and then we throw it away, and then it's gone forever, and those nutrients are lost. Or if we put it into a waste stream that gets incinerated, that's definitely lost. And I think it's about the circular economy is about cycling materials and resources, but also it's more than that. It's about finding the value in that chain all the way round, so that it's a sustainable loop. And that's what's tricky. That's the bit that if that bit was easy, we could do that with everything.
Okay.
I think, Annette, that that there are many ways that firms, people out there can think about circular economy. So we tend to think of reduce, reuse, recycle, the 3 R's. Actually, some there are different frameworks which have split it up even further. So the Dutch Environment Agency, for instance, has 10 R's in theirs. So they start with refuse. So we don't make a product anymore. So instead of providing something as a product, provide it as a service. So the obvious one there is around the way that we consume music. Of course, it's completely changed. In our lifetimes, we've lived through LPs and tapes and CDs, and now a lot of the way that we consume music is digitally. So it would start with refusing. Then it's about their second one. So this is even before we get to reduce, would be around rethinking. So that's about sharing. So the one that people always talk about here are lawnmowers and drills. A lifetime use of a drill is something like, 20 minutes, something like that. We use it for such a short period of time. If you could organize yourself socially so that you could share things like lawnmowers, like drills, then again, that's the sort of the sharing side of it. And that's before we get to reduce, which is sort of, trying to make things more efficiently. The problem with a strategy of reduce is that marginally the product becomes better for the environment. But then if we see more sales of that same product, then actually the net environmental benefit goes, and actually there can be an environmental cost from it. So, I'd recommend looking at these different R's, 10 R's, and they can stimulate you thinking about different things that your organisation might be able to do to contribute to these circular ideas.
So I guess that one of the really significant challenges is how we respond to good old supply and demand. Is, if customers make the demand for something more technologically complex, for example, won't businesses find a way to solve that and supply it? What's your thought on that in terms of that supply and demand? How do we get people to start thinking in a different way? I think, Paul, do you want to start us there?
I can start us off with this one. I mean, Trevor early on, was dead right to highlight this systems perspective that we need on the circular economy. So it isn't just about what manufacturers can do or people within organisations within a supply chain. It is about consumption too. And part of the the reason that we are in the difficult situation that we're in is that consumerism is sort of part of our life, and people want more stuff and they want it now. What was interesting with COVID pandemic was that it highlighted the fragility of supply chains, that it wasn't always possible to get what we wanted when we wanted it. So you saw it with people going to the supermarkets and not being able to get the products that they were used to getting, but organisations too. We saw it with protected equipment, for instance, and then other fragilities in supply chains, like not knowing exactly where the products were as they were coming along, sort of quite an extended supply chain. These have all been revealed by COVID, but are opportunities for us to think about how supply chains can be more resilient. So again, it's the two things. It's we want change on the consumption side. We also want changes on the production side, and you need both of them.
Yeah. So Trevor, is it just ask you a question here quite specifically? So do you think people are at the centre of this as consumers? Do we as consumers hold the key to that? And that, if we make the demand, technology is nothing without that demand, and Betamax is a great example of that. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I think we have to re-educate people to do things differently, and it is easy to go out and just buy something, but people only buy it because it's available. So it is about making our manufacturers to understand what happens to that product through that whole lifetime.
Yeah.
And some manufacturers are getting onto that. So many people don't buy cars anymore, but they always have the new registration on their sort of drive every year. So, and that's where there's been that change, that you're only hiring vehicles up through that lease payment, and you can have that new car. And that's where a lot of sort of retailers are looking to do on those sort of car showrooms, are trying to do that. So you can actually keep putting new cars on, what probably is better for the environment, because that's how we all get more electric vehicles onto that, but you still get the new shiny tools. So we need to be starting to go away from thinking about same as the lawnmower, same about cars. Are we wanting to buy a car, or do we want to drive somewhere? So, and I think the more we can think about what are we wanting, so it is going back to the radio rentals kind of, or Rumbelows kind of move. For half the people listening probably haven't got a clue who I'm about, but you're basically just hiring. You want a washing machine because you want clean clothes. What you don't want, you're not really bothered about the washing machine in the middle of the room. And maybe that's where we need to be pushing that. So we are getting new technologies. We are getting the latest shiny TV phone, but we then need to work out for a spy. So with Apple, yes, people every September wants that new phone. How do we get them to have the new phone for those people who want shiny thing, to pass the next phone back down and have it being reused? So, because we want to reuse it, we don't want to dismantle it in the first instance, because it's probably fine for the next 3 or 4 years. I must say, we try to do that in our household, that one of us will buy a new phone and somebody else will get the old one. So it used to be me with the new one. Now it's the kids that have the brand new iPhone and I get what's left over. But I think that whole idea of is what I want is something, I'd say something to make a call on, but something to pick my emails up on. I don't really want a phone. So I think that's the change of people's mindset. They don't need to own, they just need to have that device or that service that they want. And I think that's quite a change.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very big change. Sharon?
Yeah, just to add to that as well, because it's the other aspect of that reuse, is in the way that goods are manufactured, so that when one component breaks, the whole lot gets thrown away. So there's this concept of planned obsolescence that I just don't think should be a thing. I think, like, this day and age, while we've got the problems that we've got, that should be, done away with. Things like, I don't know if anybody's had the frustration of having a printer and found out that the cartridge costs more than a new printer with free cartridges that come with it. That shouldn't ever be a thing. And then we've got components that don't fit different things. So we've just had, you know, the thing with how many people have got, I wonder how many phone chargers people have got lying around their house, or how many, you know, drawers have got old electronics that just are not compatible. So I think one of the things that needs to happen is that components need to be interchangeable, so that even if you do upgrade something, that those parts can be taken back by the manufacturer and reused, rather than, I think we send it, particularly plastic as a material lasts for hundreds of years. Yet, you know, things like, you know, the free toys that you get from, you know, with your fast food are still a thing, or those chocolate shaped egg things with toys in that shouldn't be a thing. If you're not going to hand it down to your grandchildren, you know, what these things, again, you know, the last minutes, you know, they're a novelty, and this awesome material should not be a novelty. And why are we making things that we use single use and then throw away? Why not make them so that they do last and you can reuse those components? So we've had this move towards miniaturization. So things like, you know, thinking about batteries and components that are glued in, you know, and they're not changeable. So when that goes, the whole component goes, or it's not easy to change batteries in electronic goods that, you know, just get thrown away and become disposable. That should never be a thing. So I think we need to rethink as well the design of what we're doing, so that, and that's not just like goods and gadgets, that's everything, you know, everything that we use.
Trevor.
Yeah, so on that basis, I've worked with one of our local consultants that's been working with a large product manufacturer. They make snacks. So we sat there for a day with all their wonderful scribbling and marketeering and these kind of ideas about what should they do and how should the product be made and how can they get their logo and show off the snacks inside the tubs. It was great. It was really interesting to see that side. And then we took them to see a MRF, a materials recycling facility, how your recycling is separated. And that was supposed to be a half an hour, just show them around to show that this is your container, this is how it will come in and how it'll be separated. About 2 hours after getting there, we had to drag them away. They were fascinated about how their product would come through that system. And if we changed their product to make it longer, thinner, thicker, heavier, what would happen through this process. And the second day, the marketeer people were sort of pushed to one side, and the packaging design people and the environmental people suddenly came to the front, and it was like, oh, how do we show that our product can be recycled properly and really be recycled? And it was really refreshing, and that's showing we're probably not getting people to see the next piece in that chain or the loop. We do need to get people who are putting stuff on the market to, through maybe local authorities who are picking most of it up, out to other processes about how they get it back in. And I think the more we can show the next stages on, the better. People will buy these toys and these sort of rubbish from McDonald's because it's there. We need to say no, or we need to say, well, we want something what's more usable. But I think if McDonald's could see this toy, the only thing that's going to end up there is, if we're lucky, it's going to go to energy from waste. The chances are it'll go to landfill and not be seen for the next 200 years. So we just need to get that education as a business. So every business needs to ask, the product I'm putting on the market, what happens to it when somebody wants to throw it away? Whether that's in a day or a minute or in 10 years' time, how does it get back into that to the next person to deal with it? And I think that's what we all need to be asking, what's next with our product?
Yeah, and not just labelling.
No, you've just hit on something there, I think, Trevor. It's like, what role do marketeers play in this whole thing, you know, in terms of changing behaviour and enhancing awareness? What do you want to come in, Paul? You had something to say.
Well, I think it's worth acknowledging that this is a really difficult issue, you know, changing values, changing ways of life. It is a tricky thing. This is not something new. I think there are elements of consumer behaviour that we understand well, other bits that we don't understand well at all. What I sense with the COVID pandemic is that there seems to be a palpable sense of reservation about going back to what we had before, going back to normal. And you hear phrases like building back better, for instance, and the sorts of examples that Trevor was talking about. I'm right behind that. As an academic, one of the best bits of our job, I'm sure Sharon will agree, is the opportunity to go into firms and see what they do and how they do it, and how people on the production line are excited about the new technology that they've brought in to be able to remanufacture or repurpose waste material. I think that can be quite infectious, but there's no silver bullet to this problem of consumerism, and I think it is a complex area. And marketeers, to get back to your question, I think they have a role to play. Their job is in communicating the products or the services that the company is making goods and services to meet people's needs, and I think that I think that they can look for ways to try and sell how sustainable the company is, and to use that as a marketing strategy.
Yeah.
Sharon. Yeah, can I just add to that as well? Because that's exactly what I'm seeing with the business interaction and things that I've got, but also with the public. So I've just done a big study on waste, and I've kind of spent those people who know me know, I've spent the last year sort of sifting through people's bins to kind of link that waste behaviour. It was quite disheartening to see how many recyclable items were in there, but it kind of got me to thinking. I started my PhD looking at glass manufacturing. I've got glass here, and this glass melts this glass would have probably been made at about, I don't know, somewhere around about 1400 degrees Celsius. To get up to those temperatures is massive. It's a massive energy investment in that. But all the containers that we have, jars, bottles, wine bottles, they get collected, smashed up, and processed back into glass. But the amount that we've got these mountains of glass that glass is an incredibly durable material. But when you reuse it, we see the milk bottles that we're using. If anybody remembers back in the days of Rumbelows, I used to earn my pocket money by collecting pop bottles and taking them back to the shop and getting a deposit. And anyone who remembers the bottles and old Coke bottles and things, they would have a white ring around them where they knock together and they get scuffed. And that was how glass is. We used glass. It's not shiny and perfect. But I think, the one of the barriers to us reusing is the fact that it won't be perfect and the consumer won't accept not perfect. But I don't think that's true anymore. I think the world's moved on from that expectation. And I think, the public are ready for that change, but the choice isn't there. And I think that's one of the things that we need to, I think, any businesses out there who have the opportunity to kind of delve into that market, there is an opportunity there with a public that are ready.
Yeah. And I think that goes wider as well. So CIWM just moved offices about a year ago. And 95% of the furniture in there is pre-loved furniture from other offices. Fantastic stuff that they managed to get. The boardroom table is made out of yogurt pots, and they've actually kept some of the flicks of the metal in there. So it took a little bit more resourcing, but actually it was cheaper. So even the carpet tiles are being brought in from somewhere else. So we can do this on many different fronts. It's just thinking differently. So the hardest bit, the easiest bit would have been just to bring the local office fit company in to do it. But it took a little bit more working and a little bit more networking to find it. But the result was a lot better. So we can do it on lots of our product. It might not be absolutely perfect. If you look across the desks, you can see the odd mark in it. But most of us can't even see our desks most of the time anyway, because they're covered in paper. So it is that kind of basis. the odd mark really doesn't matter, but it's actually, I think people are up for that now. Having something what's
indeed.
pre-loved rather than used, whichever way you want to, is where people will go. And as long as it's good quality and moving back, there is a bit about there. But that's where the marketers need to make sure that second hand shouldn't be seen as rubbish. No. Second hand is just somebody else has loved it. Now it's your time. And I think actually COVID's really seen that change. So the amount of stuff on Facebook is being sold, sort of, or even given away, is huge. And I know I live in one of the villages around Keele. It seems there's more business going on Facebook and other selling sites than there is probably anywhere else. And that's a fantastic move that people are willing to do that.
I would agree. It's like change one by one, isn't it? You know, gradually, step by step, we get there. But to make progress, I'm just kind of throw this in as a bit of devilment as much as anything. But to make progress, do we need to break what we've got? You know, if we want to make that step change, and given that we've got this opportunity, it seems like the psyche might be the best it's been in terms of being open to this kind of thing, and that's a question in itself. What I mean by that is there's as an entrepreneur in residence in my role as an exec director as well, there's been an obsession in business about, and also amongst economists as well, that we focuses on process and production and efficiencies, but it's that production and process and efficiencies of what we already have. And it's all about driving costs down, reducing overheads, and it takes us to a place where we are now, if you like. So how can the principles of a circular economy ever get a look in, initially at least, when the option will possibly be more expensive? And I've got a nice question here. Can I just bring in, got a nice question here from Mike Cole at the Michelin. He's asked, we at the Michelin are practitioners of the circular economy here in Stoke, where the retreading of truck tyres, retreading saves natural resources, CO2, whilst maximising energy efficiency and resource efficiency, but it is a struggle against cheap single imports. He's asking, what do the panellists think that government can actually do to help support the circular economy in this green recovery? It's a lovely question.
Yeah. So I think government spends a huge amounts of money, whether it's through whatever source it is, and actually changing some of the procurement guides that are out there or rules. I know as a local authority in the universities would be the same. I spend millions a year on truck tyres as well as trucks and fuel and all those, everything around those kind of things, but across the board, lots of things. But what we don't have in there is that what is the whole life cost of something? What is, we have these sort of tiny little questions on page 65 of the document about sort of circular costs and material values and all those kind of things of end of life costs. Moving that right up front is, what is the circular cost of an item? So I've just spent £400,000 to buy a new electric bin lorry. What's twice the price of a normal bin lorry? That took quite a lot of persuasion of my finance teams to allow me to do that. But I could justify that because I know that I'll be saving fuel, so it'll be air quality, but actually I'll be saving money because it's producing electricity, and we're looking to build a PV farm as well, so we're producing our own. But that was to move that across. Sometimes I've had to, that capital outlay is huge, but we've looked at that whole life cost, and that's the same with this. And I think if government put more pressure on its spend to say that we have to look at that, A, it will save money in that long term, but B, it'll probably make those materials circulate. And once we get that out there, that's easier then for suppliers. So Michelin, if they were leading on that retreading of tyres, suddenly that cheap import is not cheap when you look at it over the whole lifetime. And that comes back to, I don't want to buy tyres, I want to buy a service. So why would I buy my tyres from Michelin? I want revolutions. You tell me how many miles that tyre will do, and you just replace it. So Philips don't sell light bulbs anymore. They sell light. We need to move to that change.
It's a good example. The Philips one. I think government, do have a big responsibility here to try and drive a more circular economy. It's not something that we can leave it to business to do on its own. I think, as Trevor has said, procurement is one route that governments can take. I think they also need to support the development of standards about what is a circular product, what is a circular business. There's been a surge of activity amongst financiers, particularly over the last couple of years, looking for opportunities to invest in circular businesses. So the joint initiative on the circular economy at the EU level has 10 billion over the next 5 years to support circular businesses. There are banks, again, across Europe. Intenso San Paolo has a credit facility of 5 billion to support circular businesses. There are organisations like BlackRock, the fund manager, they manage $7 trillion worth of assets. They're the largest asset manager in the world. In 2019, they launched a new circular economy investment fund. All right, it's only $20 million, but a player like that getting involved signals to the rest that there's a financial return associated with investing in these companies. That's large companies. Smaller companies, there are organisations like Circularity Capital in the UK, headquartered in Edinburgh, that invest in small, medium-sized circular businesses that are expected to outperform the market. So these are not, when we're talking about the financiers backing these circular businesses, they're not doing it in the expectation of losing money. They're doing it in the expectation of making money, whether that is through resource savings, whether that is because there is a drive from the marketplace to do it, whether it is because we are better accounting for the costs of linear businesses, which aren't with the risks of that are not properly accounted for at the moment. So, I think we can take a great deal of heart from looking at the finance world and seeing how it is getting a more of an interest in the circular economy. And I think there's some things that we can do to support that as well. I think government has a very important part in helping to create standards and to regulate and to have oversight to make sure that the investments in circular do actually reduce environmental benefits. And those things might seem like they're easy to say, but actually there's quite a lot of work developing the sorts of tools and techniques that you need to properly show what impact is saved as a result of these circular strategies. And just finally on that point, that there has been a bit of tool development over the past year as well. So Ellen MacArthur Foundation have launched their, I think it's called Circulytics tools. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development have launched, I just forget what theirs are called, but maybe circular transition indicators or something like that. These are all ways of helping us make the sort of argument that Trevor was making about internalising these costs and demonstrating that that this circular investment is one worth making.
Yeah. Okay, Sharon.
I think just on that point though, there's still a problem with the circularity and the pricing of materials. So at the moment, while you can still buy virgin materials cheaper than you can recycle materials, then you're still going to have that disparity that Mike Cole was just talking about. And you've got, that should never be a thing. It should never be cheaper to use a virgin material made from fossil fuels and everything else when you've got this. But the processing costs of using recycled materials or pre-loved materials is always going to be more. So I think the government has a role to play, I think, in evening that out. And if we could have taxation on on raw materials and virgin materials, so that it levelled the playing field, and then at least established that market for then, because right now, you know, we've got problems around material security, around a lot of the you know, we're trying to support UK manufacture, yet a lot of the materials that we need for things like electronics, we're going to be having all these electric vehicles where the battery is going to come from, and we're reliant on importing all of those minerals when we have a waste stream of all of these batteries that we're sending abroad, because we have no way, it's not economic for us to do it on our own soil. And that should never be a thing. Like last year, we had all of those emotive pictures of waste all ending up in the environment. And we had the big scandal about the waste streams being broken abroad, where we have very little control over those. And again, if the pricing was right for us to deal with these things on our own soil, or to deal with them properly, and the value is back in the chain, I think a lot of those things will be sorted out.
Can I just ask a question then, or for a challenge? Because it is a real challenge to manufacturing, and it's very, very much a big part of the recovery under COVID. I think this is one of the challenges. Given what you said, it is cheaper to make virgin plastic rather than recycled. Should there be a draconian tax? Does the government, you know, in terms of that pricing policy and taxation, it does play a part in. Should there be a draconian tax on virgin materials?
I think that when you talked about there being breaking something to remake it, there would be then casualties, because some firms rely on that pricing. But there has to be, that's where the government come in. And I think to move to that model, I think that any tax that went on virgin materials could then get ploughed into supporting alternatives. That's where the government can step in and level the playing field.
Yeah.
Mike,
so
do you want to come in? Yeah.
I think on that tax, we just need to be really clear that we are moving that money across. It doesn't go into the general coffers. So whatever we do and look at on plastic tax, what will be coming under the new resources and waste strategy, and that is marching on, because, you know, I'm talking to DEFRA this week about that. I think it is a case of those kind of things. We need to make sure that money is ring fenced and ploughed in. So it taxes virgin material, so you get that 30% uplift on the cost in one way, but you also get a saving back the other way. So that really moves it forward. And I think the more we can get that in there, and we get that this is the direction of going. This makes sense, and you're getting proper supply chains in. Eventually, that tax will start to not be the needed so much, because you've got better and cheaper supply routes. Because we talk about that tax and virgin material being cheaper, but we've just paid for £100 a tonne for that plastic to be burnt in incineration. So there's a cost if we just dump it, landfill it, or burn it, where you need to plough that cost back into actually having it reprocessed. And I think we forget about that, and that comes down to the beauty of a linear system. And if we can break that and say, well, that material has a real cost. So make, again, I don't want to buy a bottle of water. I want the water inside it. So make that company own that bottle all the way around. And then suddenly they'll realise that if they've got the bottle, they've got to then have it reprocessed. And again, that's where the resources and waste strategy will really help that process. Because at the moment, businesses and us, we're only paying 10% of the cost of our waste management. The new system will mean that the businesses will pick up 100% of that cost. What will really refocus about what do they do with the products they put on, the packaging they put on the marketplace, to do something different. And that just blows the model, the current model, out of the water, because they will want to see those cans or bottles being reused, because they're going to pay for it, and it's cheaper to reprocess if they keep control of that material. So I think there is a game changer, as long as, again, legislation keeps going, and as I say, we are being promised that legislation will be coming through with consultation at the end of this year for legislation for 2022, 23. So let's hope they stick to that word as well.
And we have. Sorry, did you want to come on, Paul? I was just going to take us in a direction.
Only to sort of, you know, broaden the argument really, and say that government has a lot of levers at its disposal that it can pull tax just been one of those. I think it needs to look at the subsidies it provides for carbon-intensive industries. I think it can look at procurement, as Trevor was talking about. It needs to be involved in standard setting. It can provide loans and grants to fund R&D and innovation. So I think whenever we start talking about single interventions, we can think more broadly than that and think in the round about what government can do.
Yeah, absolutely, and make it more compelling. I mean, one of the questions is always said to me, if this is so compelling, why aren't more businesses doing it? And that's exactly why, isn't it? We need to make it more compelling so that it becomes a natural choice. So just another question really is about what role does regulation play? Because we've talked about, we've dotted around regulation a little bit. Is this the key to change? Is it regulation? Is it guidance? I have a view, but I would like to know your views. And is there the political way? Because what COVID has taught us more than anything is actually when governments want to change, they can change fast. And they want regulation in place. So don't tell us anymore. This is going to take some time because it doesn't have to. It's just been proven to us it doesn't have to. So is it guidance or is it regulation? What's important and what will help to make this start? How do we get it going?
Shall I take this one? Or
yes.
Sorry.
Yes, please, Paul. No, but fine.
I was about to speak and then I saw Trevor open his mouth, so I didn't want to cut you off. If you look at the academic literature on eco-innovation, so this is changes in the way that we do things that reduce our environmental impacts or contribute to some sort of sustainability target, then the single most important driver in those studies is regulation. Not all regulation, though, is effective. So there's another literature about what type of regulation is effective. So you want it to be stringent, you want it to be enforceable, you want it to be flexible, and that's not what we see. So I think there is opportunity for policy innovation, where governments can look at how they set the rules by which firms play, and it is a way of raising the bar.
Yes, Trevor.
Yeah, so I think regulation, we will have to go down that route to make that change, because if not, the danger is we'll all do something slightly different. And the regulation will help, but it has to be across the sector, the wider sector, for all of the change, so we know what we're doing and how that's working together. It's very difficult when it's only guidance, especially if there's a cost for implementation at the first stage. People will wait. So regulation helps, it brings it together. So Wales, with their waste policy, have been very clear about what they're expecting. While some of that is guidance rather than regulation, what they've done is made sure that if you don't follow the very tight guidance, you don't get funding. So you might as well just call it regulation, because that's what basically you're going to get fined or you're not going to get the support. So I can't quite see how they got away with that, not calling it regulation. But I think that's where it needs to be. It's a clear path, bringing all areas together, that allows people then to know what they're going to do. If I'm going to invest money, whether that's hundreds of pounds or millions of pounds in changing a process, I want to know that process is going to be consistent across the board. I'm not going to provide something what's lots more expensive than everybody else. And I want to know that that's going to be around for a while, so I can actually invest capital into making changes. And that's what people want, some certainty. And I think regulational change provides that certainty. And I do think government can do that a lot quicker than it used to be. You couldn't get any new acts in. It takes 5 years to get an act through. Well, we've seen with COVID, policies are being announced at the press, number 10 press briefing at 5 o'clock on a Monday, and by sort of Thursday or Friday that week, that's been set as legislation that we can all follow. So they can do it. That maybe there's a danger of some of that regulation's not necessarily being that good, but a little bit more timely would be better. But we don't need to spend years and decades trying to get this thing. We do need to move through, because this is the time to change.
Yeah. Sharon, do you have something to add?
Yeah, it's just really to echo that speed in which we do things, because I've been teaching this stuff for some time and working with postgraduates doing projects, and it seems that we've been talking about this for a long time, and everybody seems to know the problem, and people are frustrated. The public working with, and the public I'm talking about now, so consumers at the end of that chain, and everybody wants to do the right thing, but it's difficult when you don't know all the facts, and like coming back full circle to the terminology. You think you do, and what makes it worse is when people think that they're doing the right thing and then find out that they're not. So there was a big scandal around recycling where it was really ending up, and it knocked confidence out of that chain. So I think whatever we do as we go forward and tackle these problems, it has to be real and it has to be genuine, and it has to work and be well thought out. It can't just be a knee jerk. And I think that's really important. Public confidence has been really rocked, and especially with things like labelling and greenwashing around things that are labelled as recyclable, but you have no way of recycling it. It knocks that confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul?
Just a final comment on this, really, which is to reiterate the point that just as innovation isn't easy, neither is regulatory innovation. It's not easy for governments to do either, and I think that's where industry has a role. They are at the coalface of seeing how these regulations worked in practice, and so I think if more dialogue between perhaps through the Environment Agency can highlight or put the spotlight on some of these peculiarities of regulation to help design a better, more effective regulatory framework.
Yeah. So just to finish this off, because we've sadly come to the end of our time today. So just to ask you a really open question, and would you regard yourselves as environmentalists, campaigners, influencers, waste managers, recyclers, or something else? Goes back to the first question.
Yeah.
Yes, Sharon?
I think something else. I think I'm more of a sustainability specialist, because you can't just all of those things, the environment. So in the sphere where I'm working, resources, environment, impact, prevention, working innovation, all of those things are all wrapped up in education. So like one of the key things I work with are the UN sustainability goals. And if you look at those, the breadth that those cover, and these things are all intertwined. And I think for me, the word sustainability it kind of encompasses all of that. So I'm a sustainability specialist, I think.
I like that. Yes, Paul?
That's very good. I've sort of got no illusion about my what I can and can't do. Fundamentally, I've spent 20 years as an academic. I research and I teach, and just like Sharon, I'm trying to contribute in my own way to try and reduce some of those environmental benefits and try and improve social outcomes.
Yeah. And Mike?
Or Trevor?
Trevor.
Oh, Trevor, sorry. Sorry.
So I think I would like that idea about sustainability. So I'd probably put myself down as a sustainability resource manager. That picks out what I need to do that material, and I need to make sure it's handled well and passed over well.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. It's a very interesting and insightful conversation. I think we need to be having so many more of these. This should really just be the introduction to this stuff, shouldn't it? We need to be doing more of these in the webinars, and I'm sure we'll be able to do that and pick this up in the future. So, but just to say thank you so much for your contributions today. It's been fantastic. And just for me to say thank you to you, and thank you to the Hixon Group for hosting the platform. Thanks for the audience and for your questions, and for you to to remind everyone to continue the conversation on LinkedIn and Twitter at #KeeleTalksBusiness. Future webinars are advertised on the Keele website, so please look there. And if businesses have a problem they need solving, Keele's Business Gateway has a series of programs, expertise, talent and space available to support. So please again contact the Business Gateway to inquire. And just let you know, there is a boot camp, an introductory boot camp over the next few weeks for anyone starting or looking to start a business, especially this plays to clean tech and sustainability sector. So find out more on the links on the university website. So hopefully to see some of you there. So just to say thank you and goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.